Richard Hale lay in the quiet of the hospital's VIP ward, a man who once commanded the world with wealth and power but now sat face to face with death. He was 68, his body frail, his spirit tired, and his heart utterly empty. Cancer had eaten away at his strength, and though the doctors offered treatment after treatment, he refused them all. He signed the papers himself, declining chemotherapy, rejecting surgery, and even turning down the painkillers that might have eased his nights. He wanted the end to come naturally, without tubes, without machines, and without any false hope. To Richard, life had already lost its meaning. He had spent decades building empires, collecting riches, and crushing rivals, but now in his final days, he had no one to share his fortune with. His wife had left him years ago, his son had cut ties after years of neglect, and he had driven away every true friend in his pursuit of success. All he had left were empty rooms, bank accounts that meant nothing, and regrets that weighed heavier than the illness itself. He wasn't afraid of death, he was afraid of living one more day with the loneliness that had become his only companion. But everything began to change the evening Dr. Isabella Carter walked into his room. She was 32, a brilliant young oncologist known not just for her skill but for the compassion that radiated from her. Most doctors maintained distance from their patients, but Isabella was different. She believed in looking past the illness and seeing the person. That night, she stood by Richard's bed, studying the man who had once been untouchable yet now lay utterly defeated. "Mr. Hale," she said gently, "you've made your decision clear, but may I ask you something?" He didn't look at her. His eyes stayed fixed on the city lights outside the window. "Doctor, I've lived long enough. I don't want pity, and I don't want false hope. Save your words for someone who still believes in them." Most doctors would have left at that point, but Isabella didn't. She pulled a chair closer to his bed, her presence unshaken. "This isn't about pity," she said softly. "I just want to understand, why are you so determined to leave without fighting?" For the first time in days, Richard turned his head toward her. His lips curled in a faint, bitter smile. "Because I spent my whole life fighting. I fought for money, for power, for everything that doesn't matter now. And in the process, I lost everything that did. My wife, my son, any real friend I might have had. What's left? To buy a few more months of loneliness? Tell me, doctor, is that a fight worth taking?" Isabella felt her chest tighten at his words. She saw the truth beneath his bitterness. This wasn't a man who wanted to die, but a man who had forgotten how to live. In that moment, she made a choice that would risk not only her career but her heart. She decided she would not let him slip away believing his life had no value. Over the weeks that followed, Isabella broke the invisible rules that doctors were expected to follow. She didn't just treat him like a patient, she treated him like a man who needed someone to truly see him. She spent hours with him, sometimes in silence, sometimes listening to his stories. Slowly, Richard began to open up. He told her about his childhood in a small farmhouse, how his mother used to sing to him at night, how he once loved painting but abandoned it for business. He spoke of regrets, of missed birthdays with his son, of choosing money over moments that mattered. For the first time in decades, his walls began to crack. Isabella, in turn, shared pieces of her own heart. She told him about her younger brother who died of leukemia because their family couldn't afford treatment, and how that loss drove her to become a doctor. She spoke about the sacrifices she made, the long nights, and the silent promise she carried to never let anyone feel as helpless as she once felt. Her honesty touched Richard more than any medicine could. One night, he looked at her with eyes clouded not by sickness but by vulnerability. "Why are you doing this, Dr. Carter? Why risk your reputation caring so much for someone like me?" She didn't flinch. "Because no one deserves to die thinking their life had no worth," she said, her voice trembling. "You matter, Richard. Not because of your fortune, not because of your mistakes, but because you're human. And every life matters until its very last breath." Those words stayed with him long after she left the room. They began to echo in the silence, drowning out the despair that once filled his nights. For the first time, he felt something he hadn't felt in years: hope. Still, the journey was not easy. The hospital board began questioning Isabella's methods. Some of her colleagues whispered that she was becoming too emotionally involved, that she was crossing lines doctors weren't meant to cross. She was called into meetings, warned of suspension, accused of unprofessionalism. Yet every time, she stood her ground. If caring is a crime, she told them, then I am guilty. And I will not apologize for treating a human being as more than a file. Her courage gave Richard the strength to try. Against all odds, he agreed to undergo one round of treatment. The staff was stunned, nurses whispered in the halls, but Isabella simply sat beside him, holding his hand as the four dripped into his veins. The weeks that followed tested them both. The treatment left Richard weak, nauseous, and drained of energy. There were nights he begged to stop, nights when he cursed himself for even trying. But Isabella never abandoned him. She read to him from books he once loved, she brought in small canvases and paints to help him rediscover the passion he had given up, and she reminded him, day after day, that his life still mattered. Slowly, something miraculous began to happen. The treatments started working. The cancer, though aggressive, showed signs of retreat. His strength returned, not all at once, but little by little, enough to spark hope. Yet the greatest healing wasn't happening in his body, it was happening in his soul. Encouraged by Isabella, Richard reached out to his estranged son. The first phone call was filled with long silences, broken sentences, and years of unspoken pain. But when his son finally whispered, "Dad, I thought you'd never call," tears streamed down Richard's face. It was the first time in years he felt like a father again. Each day that followed, he painted, he smiled, and he began to live in ways he never had even at the peak of his wealth. When Richard was finally discharged, he walked out of the hospital frail but standing tall, carrying with him a painting he had made during his recovery. It was a sunrise, golden and bright, and at the bottom he had written words that would forever mark his gratitude, "For the doctor who gave me back my tomorrow." His story spread quietly through the hospital, not because he was a millionaire, but because it reminded everyone that sometimes medicine is not just about science, it is about love, compassion, and the courage to care when it's easier to walk away. In the years that followed, Richard reconciled with his family, rediscovered his passion for painting, and lived not as the lonely man he once was but as someone who had learned the true meaning of wealth. Whenever people asked him about his fortune, he would smile and say, "I thought money was the greatest treasure a man could have. But I was wrong. The greatest wealth is a heart that dares to love." And so his story, and Isabella's courage, became a lasting reminder that kindness has the power to heal wounds deeper than illness, to touch souls darker than despair, and to bring back light where only shadows remain. If this story touched your heart, share your thoughts in the comments. Do you believe compassion can change someone's life? We'd love to hear your feelings. And if you want more soul-stirring stories like this one, make sure to like, subscribe, and stay connected to Be Kind Always, because in a world that often forgets kindness, together, we can keep its light alive.